Are you having fun so far?
Great time.
Okay. Well, you don't sound like you're having a good time.
No, that was
Okay.
genuine.
All right. Awesome.
That was a great lunch, but if you're in the first 4 rows, I apologize for my breath. If they'd have been a raffle where you were giving away mints, I was going to be right there.
Mentos and Coca-Cola for anybody who wants some. Sorry, Mentos and Coca-Cola, if you've seen that, it's just a science experiment. All right. So with that, I'd love if you all could introduce yourself. Paige, why don't you go first and straight to my left?
Yeah. So hi everyone, my name is Paige Krieger. I work for IBM Blockchain Platform. I am the program manager focusing on digital engagement. And I live in Dallas, but love to come up to Seattle. So if you're located there or here, anywhere in between, would love to chat with you if I haven't already. And thanks to Jonathan and TF Blockchain for having me.
Oh, thank you. We actually had Paige come to our very first Austin chapter, our inaugural event. She was there. Awesome.
Hi everyone, my name is Rachel Wolfson. I'm a journalist, write for Cointelegraph. I was with Forbes most recently. And my focus has been enterprise blockchain for quite a while now. So I've got a lot of content online about enterprise blockchain. And I'm actually writing a book right now on the topic as well. So hopefully in a year from today, it will be out. And although I'm a journalist, I interview all the experts. So I wouldn't say that I'm an expert myself, but I definitely talk to experts every day almost. So.
You're an expert by association, and and next time we'll be handing out autographed Rachel Wolfson books.
I hope so.
Yeah.
1 year from today.
Awesome. And Christian?
Hi, Christian Hasker. I head up marketing for Hedera Hashgraph. I live in San Francisco, but hail from England.
Nice. Well, thank you all for coming here. So when we were putting this panel together, a lot of times when I've been at events and I see an enterprise blockchain panel, it's everybody on the enterprise, right? And I thought it'd be really interesting to talk about enterprise blockchain from 3 different points of view. So notice we have IBM, we have a journalist reporting on the enterprise, and then we have a startup that's working hand in hand with enterprise customers, right? So, the topic is enterprise blockchain demystified. What actually needs to be demystified about it? What's so scary about it? You think for not necessarily like the top enterprise, but the one level down, right? Who's not necessarily invested in blockchain just yet? What's stopping that?
Trust issues and egos is what I would say, as well as standardization. I think that nobody wants to be, not very many people want to take the risk of being the first mover, and they're afraid of change and or failure. And so it's definitely a space where everyone's saying, oh, I'll jump in when so-and-so does, or I'll follow you. And there's just not enough people taking that leap from an enterprise perspective, whereas in the startup world, I feel like they're willing to take that chance, and it's paid off for various startups that we've worked with and others that I've read about.
100%.
Yeah, so I think that a lot of enterprises are hesitant to get into the blockchain space, first of all, because blockchain's association with cryptocurrencies. So I think we really started seeing the rise of enterprise blockchain come in 2019, early 2019, after the ICO boom. And basically, all of these ICOs were, seen as non-legitimate, and that's when the space really needed to gain legitimacy. So that's when enterprises were like, aha, we can at least use this technology for other applications that can help with supply chain management. But a lot of enterprises still, they look at blockchain, they still think about cryptocurrency. So I think that that's why a lot of them are hesitant. And also, like Paige was saying, this isn't really a me technology, it's more of a we technology. And so culture has a lot to do with it. Aside from technology and all of those aspects, a lot of this is about companies that are typically competing organizations coming together and working together and sharing data, but still we're keeping that data private. So anyways, I think those are some things that need to be overcome before wide adoption actually occurs.
I would just say ditto. That was a great answer. Cryptocurrency is definitely a trigger word for enterprises. I also think just enterprises are designed to move slowly. When you talk to their innovation groups within a large enterprise, they are gung-ho. There's always someone within any enterprise that is looking at blockchain and trying to apply it. But for that to go from that very small group and permeate a large global company takes a long time, especially with a lot of other competing priorities. A lot of enterprises aren't even complete with a cloud migration or a digital transformation migration, and then you're coming along with the next big thing, and they're just not quite primed for it yet.
And just to piggyback off that, I think that they don't necessarily have the in-house talent or the developers because there's such a large skills gap. And so until they feel that they can sufficiently, sure, they can hire someone to build the blockchain for them, but if they can't run it and manage it on their own after the fact, they just see it as a never-ending expense as opposed to something that's sustainable. So I think that's a big piece.
Yeah, I'll chime in on that too. It seems also is that there's not only just a skills gap, but it's also a mentality shift, right? Is that you're so used to operating in one domain or one level of thinking, and what I find the most interesting about blockchain in general is it really just stretches the way that you start to think about the exchange of value and all the participants, and then access, data, all that sort of thing, right? So from that point is when you think about what makes it difficult for do you see a world in which a startup can, start to overtake? Because it seems like there's two different spectrums when it comes to blockchain. There's, top-level enterprise companies like IBM, Microsoft, Amazon. For the most part, they're going to be very forward-looking because they kind of have to be, right? But then again, you go that next level down and in between, and not a whole bunch. And then you have all these startups that are like, hey, wow, there's some interesting opportunity. But one of the issues with a startup is that you have to build all the product market fit against your use case, right? So like, someone says, I want to be a real estate blockchain company. You still have to become a real estate technology company first, right? So what are some interesting ways that the blockchain, an enterprise blockchain can partner, say, with a company like that, or opposite way, right? Like, so if someone wants to work with IBM, what do they do?
So there's various routes. A couple of the things that I think are most interesting and are least publicized, one would be our digital mentorship program, and it's something that we've put 40 startups through around the world, and basically it's a pro bono effort where if you have your use case or a POC completed and you're looking to get on the IBM blockchain platform but you've hit a few roadblocks or just have some questions, basically you have 6 weeks of time with an architect who's in your same time zone, and you're put in a Slack channel, and you have 2 live video sessions and then a Slack channel with them to ping back and forth any questions with a 24-hour time box on it so that you get quick answers, and the goal is that you come out of that being ready to go into your MVP. That's one option. The other is the garage services, where you really start from a design thinking session all the way through pilot. But I think for startups, the digital mentorship as well as the accelerator that we have are the 2 best ways to go about it.
Have either of you two seen anything, or for you, Christian, are you doing anything to say partner with IBM or other companies, or Rachel, have you seen any companies that you're talking to think about it in a similar fashion?
I'll go first. So actually, we were just talking previously, Paige and I, we'll be running a virtual hackathon in early 2020, which our governing council members will actually be able to sponsor some of the challenges on that hackathon. So if there's a company like Boeing that has an interest in an aviation supply chain use case, for example, hackathon participants can pick up that challenge, put something together, and actually be able to show that back to the company. Similarly, we were talking about using IBM blockchain platform together with Hedera around the Hedera consensus service for sort of the best application of that. So I think hackathons are a fantastic way that is a win-win for everyone. It's someone that may have just an idea and They can put that idea together. They can actually test it immediately with the company sponsoring the challenge. And then if you partner with an incubator as well, there's actually this off-ramp from the hackathon into an on-ramp where you can actually get some funding, take your idea, productionize it, and now you've got a company.
So, from there, I want to go to the conversation around centralization versus decentralization, right? So, when people hear the word enterprise blockchain, often they start to think like, well, wait a second, like that's centralization, like that's not actually blockchain, it's in fact blockchain. And one of the points I like to think about or discuss is like, well, depending on the network, how decentralized does it need to be, right? Like, so if it's decentralized amongst the people in that enterprise network, is that enough decentralization? So I just go along with that. What's your view on centralization versus decentralization when you think about enterprise blockchain and if it matters?
So I think it definitely matters, but I think it's also a process. I don't think it's something that we can just go into these large enterprises and say, hey, we're going to rip and replace. It's a matter of saying we're going to keep this somewhat decentralized, and then the more the network grows, the more decentralized it becomes, as well as the fact, if you're looking at the infrastructure layer, for IBM blockchain platform, now that you can run it on any cloud, that alone is decentralizing it. So it's like if the infrastructure that it's running on is decentralized and the participants are decentralized, then you're getting those aspects without fully being in a network that's, say, public or anonymous. And Christian and I were talking about the idea of protected information, not necessarily private. So I think when the future of networks and hybrid blockchain networks and all these things that you hear as predictions for the future, as those start to become a reality, that will achieve the true aspect of decentralization for enterprises.
Yeah, when I think of enterprise blockchain, I think that these networks are decentralized, but enterprise blockchain definitely has different features that make it unique in comparison with other blockchains. So for instance, they're closed, they're permissioned, fault tolerance, security, like all of that. And although, and they do involve, like, the more participants on an enterprise blockchain network, the better, because that involves more data being shared and the more benefits that actually come out of it. But although these are closed, permissioned networks, that doesn't mean that they aren't open in a sense, like data is still being shared. But since they are permissioned, privacy is still there. So you share data with certain people within those networks. So just because data is being shared, it's not transparent to everyone on an enterprise blockchain network. So I think that overall, these networks are decentralized completely, but there are just different features that make it unique from other blockchain networks out there that are open and public.
Yeah, I think I agree with all of that. If you think back to the advent of the cloud as well, AWS debuted Amazon debuted AWS in 2006, and enterprises started to look at private blockchain, and over time they would move certain workloads to a public cloud. And I think there will always be information that has to be private and even for regulatory reasons and encrypted. But I think over time you'll see enterprises start to think about, well, what can we put on a public blockchain? What does that gain us as far as trust? How does that lower costs? How does it increase our agility and speed to market?
I was just going to say, Bitfury actually has a pretty interesting use case, what they're doing with their Exonum enterprise network, but they're also leveraging or anchoring the Bitcoin network to just show transparency when it comes to timestamping real estate transactions. So I think leveraging and tapping into the Bitcoin network can be interesting for enterprises for sure, in terms of showing transparency. So timestamping and having that on the Bitcoin blockchain is great for transparency purposes. But I think everything else in terms of enterprise blockchain should be on these private networks.
Yeah, so you brought up Bitcoin, so let's talk about that. What do you say to people that say, like, well, just use Bitcoin or use Bitcoin network, or if a company wants to have their own token, we talked a little about that earlier. Why not just use the Bitcoin network for these things? if you're an enterprise company?
Yeah, I mean, there's three main things being scalability, security, and regulation. Those things can't necessarily be achieved with the current status of the Bitcoin blockchain. I'm not saying it won't get there, but for now, that makes it very difficult. And for the transactions per second that these enterprises are looking to transmit and are looking for the speed of communication that they want and the privatization of certain information or the need to know basis, you can't achieve that with the Bitcoin blockchain. So.
Yeah.
Sorry, real quick. If you have a question, please start coming up here. We're going to open up for questions here in a couple minutes.
I was just going to kind of echo what Paige was saying. I think, one of the main concerns with using the Bitcoin blockchain for enterprise is like scalability. I mean, enterprise blockchain networks scale handle thousands of transactions per second, and you can't do that on the Bitcoin blockchain at all. And also the privacy aspect, it isn't there. Like Bitcoin blockchain can be good in some instances, like what Bitfury is doing for transparency, but it's like you want to keep these networks private and closed yet still somewhat opened, I guess, if that makes sense. You don't want this data out in the public for the most part. You want it within that network. So I think the Bitcoin blockchain would be almost impossible for enterprises to use.
I'll say ditto and add one more, which is stability of the network. So we hear a lot from enterprises that the fact that these other public blockchains can split over time, with a hard fork, and now you have two versions of the truth. So if you're storing real estate transactions on a public ledger, and now that forks, which one of those is the single version of the truth? That actually becomes highly problematic, not just from a development cost perspective, but actually from a regulatory perspective as well.
Yeah. And let's talk about regulation for a quick second. I know we had a panel about that, but thinking about it from the enterprise side, how much do you think that plays a factor, right? A lot of these enterprise companies obviously have lobbyists and big legal teams. Is it more of, hey, we're already spending our energy in other places, like why would we spend our energy towards figuring this out? Or how do you pass that hoop?
I'm happy to take this one. So the very first council member that we signed up was DLA Piper, which is one of the world's largest law firms. And that was astonishing because you'd have thought a law firm would be the most resistant because of regulations. But they understand that their industry has the potential to be disrupted completely through tokenization and smart contracts and things like that. And they thought it was more important to overcome the regulatory and legal hurdles to actually have a front row seat and help almost disrupt themselves by becoming thought leaders in this space. That really helped make the case to become part of this organization. And I think everyone recognizes that while regulations are moving maybe slower than we want in the United States, the regulators are doing a good job taking the let's wait and see and do no harm approach. So I'm actually very heartened by the fact that when regulations do come, that they'll be pragmatic and sensible. That's much more preferential to have rushed out with some regulations that wouldn't stand the test of time. So it can be frustrating, but I think it will result in a good outcome.
Yeah, I mean, I think a very important point that enterprises and regulators need to realize is that when you think of blockchain, don't think about cryptocurrency. A lot of these enterprise blockchain use cases are completely free of cryptocurrency. So they don't involve tokens or Bitcoin or anything like that. They're just using blockchain simply as a technology to make data sharing easier, transparent, open, and just to make processes so much easier to save billions of dollars. Like, this is a technology. And although it is associated with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, the enterprises aren't really using it in conjunction with crypto. So I think regulators need to understand that, like, this is a technology, it's a revolutionary technology, it's going to drive a lot of digital transformation, and that's the end of it, I think.
Yeah. Blockchain and cryptocurrency are not synonymous, they're symbiotic, right? They have a symbiotic relationship. So let's go ahead and open it up to our first question.
Sure. Can you hear me? Yeah, so the question is really around business case and looking at business cases at an enterprise level. I'm sure, Paige, you've seen many POCs that really perhaps don't progress further than that, and some of them do. I'm wondering what that trigger point is and what advice you would give when putting these business cases together.
Yeah, so I would say two different things. One is around governance, not being addressed at the very beginning, although that's something that's very difficult to agree upon. It's really important moving forward because it's not necessarily the technology itself that can't keep up with the POC. It's more just that everyone needs to come to agreement on what the terms will be, what the incentives are, and what's in it for everyone, so that they're all fully committed, because we always say that the best blockchain networks come from yourself and at least two others, and some of the most successful POCs that I've seen are ones that encompass even more than that and bring those network members to the table from the very first meeting, because that ensures that everyone who's in the network sees value in the network and is committed to that end goal and the funding and the hard work that comes with it.
I'm happy to answer that one, but he walked away.
Okay.
So the best use cases for blockchain are where there is a lack of trust somewhere. And if there's, that's what you're selling with blockchain, trust. So if you don't need trust, that you probably don't have a blockchain use case. But if you have multiple parties that really have no real reason to trust one another and transact with one another without someone sitting in the middle as an intermediary, then you don't have a blockchain use case. But if you can add blockchain and remove an intermediary and transact that way, then you've reduced your cost, you've increased speed to market, complexity is reduced, all these things that enterprises love. So I'd say look for where there's the least amount of trust, and that's where your best use case is.
I'm also just going to say that I think the best use cases of enterprise blockchain are supply chain management use cases, and the majority of use cases are that, just because there are so many participants across the supply chain, and things get lost, processes aren't automated, they're old school, so enterprise blockchain brings a lot of trust and automation to those supply chain use cases. So you can, IBM Blockchain Food Trust Network, for instance, it's one of my favorite examples, just using enterprise blockchain to trace food back to its source to prevent foodborne illnesses, and they've done a great job of, doing that so far. So, yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Well, hey, Christian, Rachel, Paige, thank you so much for, actually all of you flew up here for this, so I really appreciate that. Do you have a question that you want to ask the audience that they can think about real quick in the transition for our next speaker? What's the question you want to leave them with?
I racked my brain earlier for one. I have no more. I'm only good for one question a day, apparently.
Paige has one. I can feel it.
I was going to say, I was talking to some people at lunch about this, and this is kind of unrelated to what we just talked about, but I oftentimes hear, and like you asked, that enterprise blockchain isn't truly decentralized, but I've also heard that much of the mining for Bitcoin is controlled by 5 main resources in China. So does that mean that's truly decentralized?
Interesting question to put. I'm excited for some Bitcoin folks to respond to that.
Me too. I'm genuinely curious.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much. Give me a round of applause.